I'll say this. If this defense that Jeff Hafley is putting together actually works for the Green Bay Packers, he's not going to be in Green Bay long. He's going to be a head coach. I don't doubt it anymore. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Yes, post rookie camp now. That camp is done. Just a little 2-day stretch where rookies, practice squad guys, draft picks, undrafted free agents, etc. They can all come together, kind of get orientated with the Packers or perform their tryout if that's what they're there for. Well, it's now in the book. So the Green Bay Packers opened up some time today from Adam Stenavich, the offensive coordinator, and Jeff Hafley, the defensive coordinator, for each to talk a little bit about all the new Packers that they suddenly have to coach. And so I'm going to be going through, reacting to what they said, interpreting what they said, and then also just kind of giving maybe some context about each position and the guys that they actually gave some pretty hefty shout outs to. Before we get to that, though, a little bit of news. The Green Bay Packers, following those rookie tryouts, did actually sign 3 individuals. Now, because the Packers were already at max capacity on their roster, they had to release a couple of guys in order to bring the 3 on. So who they brought on were Julian Hicks, Dimitri Stanley, and Leketa Smith. Hicks was a wide receiver from Albany, a UDFA. Stanley, a wide receiver from Iowa State, another UDFA. But Smith is a little bit more interesting. Offensive lineman who was originally a 2022 sixth-round draft pick from the Arizona Cardinals, now has found his way onto the Green Bay Packers. In terms of who they let go in order to create that space, one would be Thyrick Pitts, the wide receiver. He was actually not technically released. He was waived with an injury designation. The other would be DeAndre Johnson, a defensive lineman / edge player. And then lastly, Anthony Johnson, who spent a lot of time on the practice squad last year. Not Anthony Johnson Jr., the 7th-round pick last year, the safety. This is Anthony Johnson, the practice squatter from last year, the corner. So those are the 3 individuals who are gone. And then the last thing I also want to offer an update on, there was some reports, some rumblings over the weekend as to Jordan Love is now contract eligible for that extension. When might we see it? How big is it gonna be, etc.? Well, the current reporting out there, the rumor mill, is that the Packers are very motivated to get this done pretty quick. Yeah, that makes sense. And from Jordan Love's side, he's fully committed to the Packers, obviously, but he's willing to be patient as he sees these other quarterback contracts come in and new record-setting deals that completely reset markets. And I mean, I get that too. His agent, David Magaletta, is known as being one of the more tenacious, or one of the more, I don't want to say brazen, but certainly one of the ones who's a little bit more aggressive in advocating for his players. My take here is, Jordan, get every dollar you can. Absolutely. I also hope it leaves the Packers with a lot of room to operate. So, of course, the true dichotomy of being a fan, wanting your players to get it all while hoping the team still has a little thumb to get something done with. So, nonetheless, I think even though Jordan is willing to be patient and the Packers want to get it done, I'd be very surprised if we get out of May without a new contract. They've already talked. I think this is coming sooner rather than later. So let's do this. Let's talk the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator. Now, in case you were wondering, special teams coordinator Bisaccia, he's going to be talking later this week, as are a bunch of the position coaches, as well as maybe the NFL schedule is rumored to potentially be dropping later this week. That's not a for sure. That's just the thing being said right now. We'll find out. Regardless, when it's out there, we'll, of course, react and dissect that a little bit as well. So, talking about the coordinators, there's some really interesting kind of polar opposite stuff going on here. I listened to the 2 press conferences back to back with no break in between. And I got to tell you, I know they're at 2 different places, right? But the offense is still incredibly young. The defense, in some ways, is older than the offense. And yet, because it's rebuilding to a new scheme, it's in some ways less experienced. And what's incredibly interesting is in listening to these 2 individuals talk right now, Steno is so just ready to roll, right? And he acknowledged that a lot. He called the difference between last year and this year night and day. This point last year, he barely knew who he was working with. He had a whole bunch of rookies. He had Love entering his first year as a starter. It was very inexperienced, right? This year, it's mostly done. He's just got a few new pieces. So he's ready to experiment. Hafley, on the other hand, stressed and talked repeatedly in his stuff about fundamentals and how important they are, and how scheme doesn't matter if you can't get off a block, and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just very interesting. And I think listening to these two individuals, it goes farther than just the obvious. It goes deeper than just like, well, yeah, the defense is new. Of course, they got to start it. I think this is just how each individual coaches. Steno's talked about fundamentals before, but it's different than the way that Hafley continually stresses the importance of starting at the very beginning. And then another key difference is how these two answer questions. And I said in the intro, like, I won't be surprised if Hafley becomes a head coach sooner than later. When you ask Hafley a question, you're going to see this in just a second with a clip that I play. He's very, very direct. He's very on top of it. He doesn't kind of hem and haw. He doesn't really think. Like, he knows. He spits it out. Steno, while still being the same way, is a little bit more, just here's the question, here's the answer. It's not quite as assertive or maybe even enthusiastic as we see from Hafley. So I'm not saying who's right, who's wrong. I'm just saying that for the Packers two coordinators, they're pretty different dudes. And that is, at the very least, interesting. So let's start with the new guy, Jeff Hafley, because I got to say, like, his presentation style is just so strong. It's so good and interesting. And there was one thing in particular that I wanted to play at least a clip of, because he was asked by Jason Wilde, how do you build a defense? Like, that was basically the question. Just like, you're new here, we got a new scheme to put in. How do you build it? And Hafley gave a very good and interesting answer that I actually want to play for you here.
How do you install a defense? How do you get all the coaches on the same page? How do you get ready to teach the players it? And then what's next once you got them in OTAs and you start to actually be able to do it on the field?
I could probably spend a half hour explaining that to you, but I don't think everybody else would be too happy with me or you if I spend on that question. But I appreciate that question. One, we had the staff here, so we sat down and we kind of looked at our vision of what we wanted this defense to be. And then you decide what you want to install early and see how much we can get in the short time that we have. And then you look at all the meeting time that we've been able to get with these guys, and you have a lot of time in the classroom. So we just kind of mapped out our installation. We detailed the fundamentals and techniques of the coverages that we want to play first. And we're doing we're kind of going from part to whole, right? We're teaching certain drops. We're teaching certain coverages. And then we're kind of showing them how they can plug and play and become a whole bunch of different coverages. So we're kind of stressing the fundamentals of the techniques within the coverages, because without those, I don't think you can be good at anything. And there's other things like attacking the ball, and we want to do the little things right. And then with that, when we feel like we have a good foundation, because without a good foundation, you have no chance, we're trying to build that. And then we're adding to the coverages. And then I think ultimately for us is, let's see how much we can get in and get really good. And let's not rush, right? Let's get really good at a few things and let's install them and do them over and over again. And then we'll see where we're at the end of this thing and go into training camp and seeing what else we need. But I think for us too, it's getting a feel for the players that we have live. Now we got free agencies done and we added some additions, and then you get the draft picks and you see what they have, and let's kind of see who fits where, and then see how much we need or where we feel comfortable. I think we're in a great place right now, and that's a credit to the staff. But we've got a good amount of time with these guys to teach it in the classroom, walk through it, and then go on the field and do a little bit before we get to phase 3 and we get to practice.
When he was first hired, I talked about how, like, Jeff Hafley just sounds like a teacher through and through. And that's what I base that on. And plus, he also talked in his press conference about the 3 main tenets that the defense prescribes to or will be prescribed to. And it's attitude, effort, and commitment. Being committed to the cause, being committed to each other. Just something really, really neat. I also talked a little bit during the draft, and then of course also there's this big theme with the defense right now, and this goes outside of the teaching aspect, but Brian Gutekunst has mentioned it, Matt LaFleur has mentioned it, Jeff Hafley stressed several times that they wanted guys who could run and hit. So I'm officially coining this the run and hit defense of the Green Bay Packers. And I put that graphic out on Instagram and Facebook not too long ago, that one featuring Evan Williams, but it's so true. He even went as far as to say that in the draft, that's what they were actively looking for, was just guys who can run and hit. So there you have it for Jeff Hafley. Now, going position by position, I do want to tell you who he shouted out. Looking at the defensive line, he said that group is humming already. He already stressed that the days of reading and reacting for the defensive line are done, that they need to attack. And he ends every single defensive line meeting with, go after and get the quarterback. Sounds an awful lot like Devonte Wyatt's stock is going to be rising. I talked about him in the watch party a bunch, like in this new defense, a dude who can just pursue, go hunt, not have to worry about much else. That is Devonte Wyatt's music. He also highlighted the defensive line when talking about which position may have to learn the most in terms of this schematic change. The defensive line may be asked to do some things differently, but still, so much of it is the same. In terms of a player that he actually shouted out, he was asked directly, like TJ Slayton. He's a prototypical nose tackle. He's got a nose tackle body. How are you going to use him now in a 4-3 where the nose tackle doesn't really exist? And he basically said, like, he kind of dismissed the current, said, like, we could still give him inside leverage on a guard. We're still going to have a need for a nose tackle in certain situations. But he also complimented Slayton, saying that he's continuing his progress that he showed last year, coming off of a very strong year. Moving on to the linebacker position, the next level of the defense. And you can very clearly tell how excited Jeff Hafley is to work with Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker. He talked a lot about Quay Walker today and actually talked about how excited he is to get them on the field together. He talked a lot about their versatility, how they do have coverage skills, both in man and zone, how athletic they are, how each one could come off of the edge in certain scenarios as well. But interesting of note, he did get asked about, the Packers don't have some big linebacker. Both of these guys are kind of small. And when he got asked that question, he just kind of went, well, they're still big. Like Quay and Edge are both 230 pounds plus. It's so, but then he went on to describe that the days of a lot of teams having some 255-pound mauler in the middle of the defense who stops the run, that's pretty much gone. There aren't too many of them left. So the Packers are showing that they're adapting to the new style of linebacker. I know others out there have comped, not in terms of level of play, but just in athletic profiles, to like San Francisco with Fred Warner, who's on the smaller side, et cetera, et cetera. Packers very well might be looking to emulate that. And I talked a little bit about, previously, especially when Cooper was picked, the need for like Sam, Mike, Will, et cetera, and how the Packers just seem to be like completely getting rid of that because they might just not care. They just want athletic, long guys who can do it all. And they seem to maybe think that they found it in Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker. By the way, speaking of the linebacker position, Hafley talked a little bit about Viper, which we've talked about before. He kind of smiled and then said, like, I don't have a Viper. I've never had a Viper in this defense. Maybe for some, it's a strong safety nickel type hybrid, but maybe someday we will. There's a lot out there about how his defense, like scheme, has utilized a Viper before. And the weird thing was like the answer seemed really earnest, and yet he said it with a smile. It was weird, to be honest, but also like he just completely denied it. So maybe it's a hybrid between strong safety and nickel, when actually like a lot of the publications that are out there say the Viper is more like linebacker safety hybrid. So like, I don't know if he was playing coy or if he truly is just like, I don't have one, but I've heard about it. Everyone keeps mentioning it to me. God, that was one of the weirder points of the press conference for sure. But then talking about cornerback, he praised Jair as a great leader thus far. He was working his butt off. Talked about Stokes, Valentine, how they're both continuing on an upward trajectory, how Stokes looks great thus far. Then he was asked specifically about Kalen King, the 7th round corner that was picked from Penn State. And Hafley said, that's a good football player. He's got great instincts. Hafley also went on to say that he's not quite sure why King fell. And I've seen already online some talking about like, well, why would a coach not know why a player fell, especially as far as King did? And I got to say, like, Hafley saying, I don't know why King fell, I think is being a little facetious on his part. They absolutely can look at the tape and be like, oh, this is why Kalen King fell. I don't think anyone should come away from his comment about not knowing why he fell to be like that he doesn't know the players. And I have seen some of that out there. I know some people are thinking about it. I hope it's not any of you, but I think that's reading into it a little too far. It's also totally possible that Hafley didn't want to stand up there and be like, yeah, no, he sucks at this and this. It just doesn't feel like what he would do anyway. Then moving on to the safety position, I promise offense is quicker than this, but moving on to the safety position, you can tell that man is excited, like we all are, to have Xavier McKinney on the defense. And that's a pro. He's a great communicator. He looks out for the younger guys, which I thought was a really cool thing to highlight. Then I gotta say, I don't wonder, based upon how Hafley was talking, based upon the fact that like they don't seem concerned about traditional linebacker roles and they might be moving around Quay and edge a whole bunch. I don't wonder if McKinney is going to get the green dot and be the communicator of the defense. It's possible because they're talking right now about him being a full-on captain of the whole defense. So just something to think about. In terms of the other newcomers to the safety position, even though there's 1,000 of them, he didn't really talk about that. There were no real questions that way. So moving on to the offensive side of the ball, now we're talking Adam Stenavich, the offensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. And there were less overarching ideas here. Like I said, Stena just kind of gets a question and then answers it. And that's like it. He doesn't go into any like philosophical discussions or anything like that. So starting with the quarterback position, he was asked about Jordan Love and like how ready they are to see Jordan Love continue to ascend and all that kind of stuff. And he spoke about how like it's cool to see Jordan growing as a person and as a leader, but yet recognizing that that's the guy that Jordan Love has always been. He always puts in the work. He always has been like that kind of individual to lead teammates, etc. So now it's just about seeing him continue to ascend. It was pretty neat. Looking at the running back position, he gave Josh Jacobs a big shout out, saying that he's a running back who can stay on the field all the time, no matter what, because he can do it all. Receiving situations, he can catch the ball. Inside, outside runs, doesn't matter. He can do both. He's also, and Senna did highlight this, highlighted how good he is in pass protection. He also gave him accolades for being a strong leader and saying that he's putting in the work already. Kind of a theme of Stanovich's press conference, if you can't tell. Then looking at rookie Marshawn Lloyd, he discussed the speed at which Marshawn Lloyd plays and how excited he is to get that speed into the offense. Then he highlighted vision, burst, said it's all so present, so clearly on the film, and that he is a rookie who they want to get on the field as much as they can. For the people who are writing off A.J. Dillon, saying that A.J. Dillon is probably out now that Marshawn Lloyd is on the team, plus they got Emmanuel Wilson, and like there's just a lot of running backs. I would say, you know, there was no direct quote that I could pull, but when talking about Marshawn Lloyd, he also talked a little bit about A.J. Dillon, and there was no like exact quote. There was no like, I don't know, no highlight worthy thing here. It's just when he talked about A.J. Dillon, there was like this confidence from Stenavich that there was this that like it just kind of exuded that like Dillon is very much a part of this team. He knows what he's doing. Like, so maybe I'm looking too far into it, but like if you're rooting for A.J. Dillon to be the one to go, I don't know as if that's going to be the case, because there was this real just kind of confidence. It just didn't feel like Stenavich was talking about a fringe guy when he did mention A.J. Dillon and Dillon's situation. Felt noteworthy. Moving on to the pass catchers, not a lot was talked about here because, frankly, not a lot of the people are different. But Stenavich seems really happy with the pass catchers, both wide receivers and tight end. He was asked about, you know, do you need an alpha? Do you want an alpha, etc.? Kind of an alpha-related question. He said, he gave a really nice answer. He said, it depends on the group of people. Some groups need that definitive leader, that number one, but we don't. Because with our collection of wide receivers, every single one of them is intentional in what they do. They all put in the work. And this is the cool thing. They all root for each other's success. See, that's not the first time that that's been said. That gets said a bunch about these young wide receivers. And think about that. Wide receivers constantly get tagged with like the diva trait, right? And then, you know, plus you've got young wide receivers who are vying for catches, snaps, opportunities. They want to get on the field. All wide receivers do. And yet the Packers seem to consistently highlight, we've got guys who just don't necessarily care about that. Of course, they want to play, but they really are genuinely happy when another one of them succeeds. And that's pretty freaking cool. Then looking at the offensive line, the last of our positions, and probably the one that Stenavich talked most about, being a former offensive line coach himself. He was asked about the leadership void and what it's like. You know, Dave Bakhtiari was here for so long, and now he's gone, and just what that means. And Stenavich actually gave two shout outs to two guys who are still on the team, talking about how Elton Jenkins and Josh Myers both stepped up in a big way last year and became like different kinds of leaders than what they were. And a shout out for Josh Myers is, I think, for some people out there, is you're hoping not to hear that because you've grown kind of tired of Myers' play. But like Stenavich, whenever Stenavich talks about Myers, it's in a very, very positive light. I can certainly say that. Now, speaking of Elgton Jenkins specifically, because Stenavich was asked about positional versatility, and of course, Elgton Jenkins is one of the guys that comes to mind with that. He said that guard or center is Elgton Jenkins' best position, which is noteworthy considering how well Jenkins has played at tackle before, considering that there's tackle clauses in Jenkins' contract, but Stenavich really doesn't seem to want to put him there anymore. But then also, like, he did say that his best positions would be center or guard, which, keep in mind, when Elgton Jenkins was drafted, I know Zach Tom has the potential to be a Hall of Fame center. But when Elgton Jenkins was first drafted, there was a lot of talk about him potentially kicking into center too. So like the book may not be written on where these guys wind up, even next year after potentially Josh Myers departs. But he said that he's best at guard or center. And then Zach Tom, it was also mentioned as seeming pretty good out there at edge on the right tackle spot. On overall versatility, man, Stenavich seems really excited, though, about all of the different combinations that they could potentially march out, all of the different things they can try with the offensive line and where different guys can go. When talking about first-round pick Jordan Morgan, he said, I won't say he's a tackle. I wouldn't say he's a guard. Okay. But he was just saying, like, he doesn't want to pigeonhole him into any kind of thing. And really, like, they're just excited to get him out there with the rest of the starting line, see what combinations work best so that they can arrive at their best 5. And it certainly sounds like Jordan Morgan is going to be a key component of the best 5. We just got to see where these guys wind up. And I cannot wait for training camp to see how that works. When speaking specifically about Morgan and his play, he said the athleticism, the agility, it's both so easy to see. But he did acknowledge after a reporter asked about Morgan's hand placement, because as some people have noted, it's kind of rough at times, especially like he goes kind of outside hands a lot, and that's what kind of got him beat in college sometimes. And he said that the hands do need work, that there is technical refinement that needs to be performed in Morgan's game. But if you're consistent and you work on those hands every time, Stenavich has full faith that it's something that can be corrected through practice and technique. One last comment before moving on and closing out the video. And I thought that this was pretty neat. Stenavich was asked, you have an incredibly young team. And by the way, the Packers, who were already the youngest roster in the NFL last year, they look to be even younger this year. Like their average age might go down next season. Interesting little nugget. But Stenavich was asked about, there's so many young guys. You know, you've got the layoff from the season ending now till rookie camp, mini camps, OTAs, etc. Like guys all of a sudden have a lot of time off. You know, what do you hope for them, etc.? And he says, like, we actively in our culture do truly hope that they have time to go out there and experience being a regular human being. But at the same time, they need to understand that when they come back, they've got to be in shape. They got to get to work. And he said that this year, every single guy on the team showed up ready, in shape, and ready to get to work. Jeff Hafley gave Matt LaFleur credit several times for building a team that is very driven right now. They're competitive, they're driven, they're ready to go. Stenavich talked about every single guy being ready. One thing you can say, and it is crystal clear with the coordinators, the vibes around the team right now are immaculate, as I like to say, but also this team really just seems ready to roll. And even though we've got some time yet, I know I am too. Exciting times are ahead. Join us Wednesday for our LTB Live as we normally do. Also, check out our Patreon if you haven't yet. Just give it a gander, see if it's something you might be interested in joining. Then Friday, I will have more content out for you. Very well might be a reaction video to the schedule, breaking that down, dissecting, talking about how far they're traveling, all that kind of thing. So join me later this week as LTB rolls on. Hope you all had a great weekend. And as always, go Pack, go.